Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and a certified life coach. And these monthly webinars are dedicated to all things relationships. Most people find their way into my office as a therapist due to very serious crisis issues. So we talk about how to handle when addiction surfaces within your relationship, lying, infidelity, betrayal, when you have poor communication and there's just tension or maybe just too much hurt and resentment that shows up. So the idea that I always say is we were never given classes on how to do relationships. We just kind of muddle through them through trial and error. And I think it makes a really big difference when I can educate someone on what might be going on, what are the actual dynamics and patterns that are showing up in the relationship so that you can feel empowered to start changing those dynamics, or at least changing yourself in the relationship dyad, because it only takes one person to change an entire system. So with that said, today's topic is the final chapter. We've been focusing on mine and Scott Brassard's book, Life Anonymous, for the past year, because it's 12 steps, 12 chapters, just kind of talking about how the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous have very classic applicable themes that even people who do not struggle with any kind of addiction can really apply these general concepts to their life and find them to be a navigable tool to help you improve your relationship dynamics, explore things within yourself that need to be touched upon and processed and figured out, and learn better relational tools with other people so that you can handle the ebb and flow of life and human interaction. So today is step 12. Tammy last month said that this was her favorite step, so we'll be talking about that. But step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We try to carry these this message out to other addicts and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. And so this is the final step, but let me give you a really quick summary about the steps that led up to 12 steps. So steps 1 through 3 can generally be summarized as: I figured out that I have a problem. With all my best thinking and all my best effort, I've been unable to find a way out of this, because maybe my partner's an addict and I feel my hands are tied. I can't change him or her, and I'm miserable, or my relationship is struggling. My life is not going the way that I want it to. I feel a powerlessness because I kind of engage in this cycle of insanity, and I need relief. So steps 1 through 3 are unweaving that spider web of just kind of figuring out what's going on here and asking for help, seeking out some kind of higher power entity that you can surrender to, even though that's still an ongoing process through the 12 steps. And then seeking out a community of owning, I need to start engaging other people, leaning into other safe people to start figuring out how to move forward in this. Steps 4 through 7 are what I call like the internal work. So, okay, things aren't working for me, whatever they might be. Let's look into myself. All right, let's do an inventory of what's been going on in my life, past, present, anticipating future. What are, as the 12 steps call, my character defects, what you can call them personal flaws, who I am when I'm not exactly at my best, when I'm hungry, angry, tired, lonely, exhausted, feel unappreciated, and really knowing myself, because if I am the first one to own my struggles, my shortcomings, I will be empowered to notice them, change the patterns, and once I know better, do better. Steps 8 and 9 are when I take my focus from my internal state to my external state and start repairing relationships, engaging relationships in different dynamics in different ways. That's where we kind of make amends if we've screwed up, and just learn how to engage externally with relationships. And then steps 10, 11, 12 are what they consider daily practices, right? You don't always have to do this really deep dive into your childhood wounds or really dig up this long, arduous process of going to every person you've harmed and make amends to them. But there's this daily kind of mini version of what you should be doing in steps 10, 11, 12, which is, taking maybe an inventory of just that day or an inventory of just the past few hours. Have a mindful practice of being contemplative about who I want to be. Am I showing up that way? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to have a tough discussion? My character defects are coming out again. My righteous indignation, my tendency to be judgmental and resentful are coming out. What do I need to do about that? And shame, we always talk about shame. There's so much about shame that boils up in relationships. So that talks about that. And step 12 is the final step to say, okay, well, hopefully after all this tough work, you've had what we call a spiritual awakening. We'll talk about that for a moment. And now you need to kind of take this and breaks it into two more further steps, which is help others who might be struggling similarly. So go out of your way to kind of say, all right, for alcoholics, it's pretty obvious, right? If I have struggled with alcoholism, I'm going to be continuing to go to meetings. Maybe I'm going to be a sponsor. Maybe I'm going to help other people. Maybe I'm going to share my progress and my process with how I got sober. And that's a step of helping others who might be struggling similarly. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but really that ties in a lot to what the research is showing about how to get through grief and crisis. Is the final step is, and I have a webinar on grief that you can look back where we talk about this in more detail. But the final step of grief is I somehow find a way to make meaning of this tragedy, right? I'll never make meaning about if my child has cancer and he passed away. That you're never going to be able to make meaning about that specific moment, because how can you? But you can maybe say, I've found a group of people who have suffered and struggled similar to me, where I can cry with people who understand and can meet me with genuine empathy and compassion about what this world looks like when I'm in this state of grieving. So there's a lot of science and research that shows that the way to transcend crisis is to make meaning. And I really think that's kind of what the spirit of 12 steps is saying when they're saying, go out and help other addicts, help people who have struggled similarly to you. The other issue is when we are extremely shame-based, when we start from a shame state, which addicts definitely do more so than the general population. There's strong shame in what they do, that I'm not enough. I need to run on the treadmill and be better and do better, or shrink and numb out and distract from the fact that I feel so much shame and bad that I am bad. People who are shame-based, it gets a lot harder to hate yourself when you are serving others. It's hard to keep listening to that tape of what a crappy human you are when you are going out of your way to sponsor somebody, when you are doing your best to give to others, to charity, to time, whatever it is that fills your soul, that's a meaningful work for you. It's really hard for you to hate yourself when you're doing those kind of things. But of course, those things have to be done with boundaries. And I'm going to talk about that. And then the next component to 12 steps is practice the 12-step principles in all affairs. So let me go back and talk for a moment about the spiritual awakening concept, okay? Spiritual awakening. So again, I think a lot of people get turned off from 12 steps because of the whole spiritual God thing. And trust me, I was one of those people that by the time I had the 12 steps exposed to me, I was in like, I hate God. I don't want anything to do with that. It's a lost cause. It's just something that suckers believe in. So first of all, I think there's a lot of God as you understand him talk in the 12 steps. It doesn't have to be a one singular monotheistic deity. It can be, universal intelligence, the ocean, nature, and whatever you can grab hold on of to right size you and realize you're no greater than these other people on this earth. You're no smaller than these other people on earth. Like, we all are humans doing our best in a very flawed, sometimes brutal way, but still just trying to move along. And it can be the medium with which we have compassion for ourselves and can forgive ourselves and have that same empathy and compassion for other people. So whatever that is to you, you explore that in steps 1 through 3, and onward. But that's kind of the spiritual awakening that they're talking about. And Scott says, look, when we get to 12 steps, let's ask ourselves a couple of questions. Have we fulfilled the following? Has my cycle of insanity ended? Do I keep doing the same thing and hope for this, different results? For addicts, the most obvious cycle of insanity is that they keep drinking or sexually acting out or use pornography or gamble or, spend more money than they have or overeat or restrict, or have explosive emotions that don't serve anyone. These are big questions of saying, have I stopped my addictive behaviors? Have I generally stopped what's no longer working for me and in my attempts to engage in relationships and humans in this world? The next question is, do I feel that I have increased amount of tools and empowerment to manage the ebb and flow of life? Do I feel like life comes at me and happens to me? Or do I feel like I can assert some agency around me about when life happens unexpectedly, something I didn't see coming, trauma, struggle, engagement with another flawed person, that I feel more empowered to kind of step back and better understand what's going on within my body, what might be going on with that other person, and the skills of communication and management and adjusting my framework and having a spiritual outlet of some kind to surrender it to kind of get through those moments. So they ask themselves, step back and assess, how are your relationships with your family, your friends, your colleagues? The next question is, do I feel better about myself and this world? A lot of the 12 steps is about shame resiliency, in my opinion. Relationship skill building, but also shame resiliency, because as I've always said, shame is the silent killer of all relationships, of all engagement with other humans. It's that quiet subconscious voice in you that's saying, what if this is too much or too little to be loved and accepted, to be seen as is? This is my real package. Can someone see this and know this and love it? And that shame voice is constantly collecting evidence all day, every day, in how you engage with other people, what you do, what you don't do, other people's perceptions of you. And it quickly whispers in your ear, I've collected the evidence, and no, these are the ways that you are a terrible human and the ways that you're not going to gain love and value and worth. So a lot of 12 steps is about working through that. And a really important question to step back is to say, for the most part, I know I'm flawed. I know I screw up. I know I'm never going to cure shame. It's going to always creep up, underneath me all the time. But do I feel better about who I am? And you can imagine, obviously, addicts, when they start doing these 12 steps, so much of their life has been about lying, sneaking around, living double lives, and making promises to people's faces, knowing full well they're going to break them. Being perceived as these highly selfish, highly narcissistic people that only care about themselves. So it probably doesn't really create much self-esteem and a sense of value and worth. So one of the greatest gifts of the 12 steps, and being honest, being congruent, saying what you mean, meaning what you say, having a spiritual practice of an entity that can forgive you and love you, and somewhere that you can kind of surrender this all to, can grant you usually that greater sense of self and worth and a better sense of standing of where you are in this world. And then the last question is, are you able to practice empathy and compassion with boundaries with yourself and others? So that's kind of what we're talking about here in 12 steps, because you're going to be asked to go out there and help others, and then also practice these principles in all your affairs. So let's talk about how the 12 steps, how the 12-step fellowship starts practicing 12 steps. The most common thing, for those of you who aren't familiar with 12 steps, there's like a mentorship system that's so beautiful that I love it, that I wish every business and social organization had it, is this idea that someone who's already been there, who knows a version of what you've gone through, knows your insecurities, knows the way that you lie and manipulate, and can smell it on you before you even realize it for yourself, because they've been there and they've done that, can be a mentor. And that, in the world of 12 steps, they call it a sponsor. And then you are the sponsee. That's a really great way of saying, I've been there and I can be present for you, because the idea is that not only when you think about it, it fulfills so many necessary pieces, right? Addicts have very short memories sometimes, right? They have a genetic and a mental predisposition to overemphasize the reward of something and underemphasize the potential consequences. So you can imagine you get kind of far away from your addiction, and it's really common to fall for that. Like, it wasn't that bad. I didn't, look, I was still kept my job, or I still kept this situation. We were still married. So being a sponsor is a really important step for 12 steps for a long-term sobriety, because it's attending these meetings, continuing to share your story, continuing to help others who are just, hitting that rock bottom, is a really, really fresh reminder of how bad it really does get. How much, oh man, the people showing up 12-step meetings, they have every defense mechanism that you could imagine that Freud ever wrote down. They're going to minimize everything. They're going to discount this. They're going to use rage and righteous indignation to rationalize their behavior. They're going to be in shame. They're going to be shut down. And it is so profound to see that in action, to say, that's where I can be if I don't continue to do this work. Because personal growth is on a continuum. And 12 steps is so classic because it appreciates that this isn't like a 12 and done program. This is on a continuum. And that's what step 12 is kind of ensuring, that, hey, don't think that this is over. In fact, I thought it was really interesting when I read the traditions that the 12 Alcoholics Anonymous book, is that chapter 12, or this 12 step chapter, is like twice the length of all the other chapters, because it's filled with just a lot of like cautionary tales. Please remember, this is how you do it. This is what you need to continue to do. Please don't stop. There's a maintenance process to this. Growth is on a continuum. And so let's see, I'm telling myself that I want to talk about, the other thing besides sponsors is it also can say, okay, well, if not being a sponsor, you can be the secretary or the treasurer of the 12-step, your fellowship, pick a home meeting, have a community group of people that you meet with, that you do coffee with, that you have book study with. All that kind of stuff is a really important part of the long-term recovery process. Now, I was saying too, is that that sponsorship provides hope, accountability, and guidance to newcomers, while also helping those who've had a spiritual awakening as a result of completing the steps to remain engaged and invested in the ongoing process of recovery and healing. Growth is continuous, and complacency can be dangerous. But again, the most important thing about this, and 12 steps isn't, when they explain or narrate the 12 steps, they don't say this, but it's usually taught through the sponsorship, usually through role modeling, that you cannot serve others without boundaries. I have several other lectures and webinars on boundaries, but we have kind of this messed up culture where we affirm and highlight and lift up martyrs the people who just give and give and give and give and give and never say, ooh, I need to sleep. I need to eat. I need to take time for myself. Or I'm giving to you and actually you're kind of pretty dangerous with your behaviors and you might suck me into the vortex of your emotional toxicity if I don't set some kind of boundary here. So, I mean, some of the greatest sponsors that I've encountered have this very like laissez-faire of like, look, if you want a life that I'm leading, you want my happy, joyous, and free type life that you're seeing. Because by the way, one of the traditions that I love is that it's all about attraction, not promotion. So I will attract people. I don't need to go around and say, hey, I have 20 years of recovery and I work a really hard recovery program and I try to practice in all things what I preach. And, I don't profess my values, I practice them. And I don't need to, if I'm really living that way, I don't need to promote myself. People see it in who I am. That's one of my favorite things about working in treatment. So many of the people are in recovery and they choose to continue to work in the treatment recovery program, I think because part of like that step 12, they're continuing to give back. And they're my favorite people because they like do real life. They know struggle. They're so honest. And I want to go to there. I want to be a part of that. And I don't need them to tell me that they have 25 years sober or that they've worked a really hard, rigorous program, or 25 years ago, they were shooting heroin and selling their body. It's always an interesting story when we sit down and have lunch together, but like, it's always incredible to be around those types of people. But they also have great boundaries to say, I'm not going to chase after you. If you don't want this, if you're not ready yet, here's my number. I will answer if you call me. But they practice boundaries in all things with all relationships. And in my book, and I have this online, I offer it for free on my website. I have this really great chart for how to practice healthy boundaries that I'd encourage you all to look at, check out, because practicing boundaries, when I first heard them, I was like, oh God, like another hippy dippy word that therapists love to use, that overused like the codependency concept. But really, when I looked at boundaries, it just started poking holes in all my relationships and how poorly I do them. And I know that I'm doing them poorly because if I pull out and really look at myself, I have a net loss. I have a net exhaustion going on in my soul where I just don't feel worthy, valuable. I feel angry. I feel resentful. I feel passive aggressive. These are all things that show up when you give and give and give without boundaries. So the important thing about boundaries is that one must give to others without the weight of duty, obligation, or even maybe this idea of like quid pro quo. I'll show up for you. You better show up for me. I give you a pass on this. You better give me a pass later on. Opting out of healthy boundaries can drain your emotional resources, lead you to feel like a martyr, and contribute to resentment and passive aggressive. And of course, as you can imagine, if I'm feeling that, if I'm giving and giving without boundaries, you can imagine that that's going to pile on my not so great parts of myself, my character defects, right? Where I go to when my tank's not full. And then you can see how that would lead to you relapse, right? That's usually the little tiny mini steps that lead to the relapse, is that you were giving or trying or doing life without boundaries. So of course, 12 steps is also about acknowledging that you serve those who have struggled similarly, but always with boundaries. And just a reminder that completing 12 steps will never result in the end of adversity of challenges. You're not just going to walk to the Emerald City and everything be perfect. Life will continue to present challenges, and people will continue to disappoint you. And by the way, you will continue to disappoint others, but it just provides you these amazing skills and community and framework and just a space where you feel more equipped to handle them than you previously did before. So let me just finish this by saying the exercise that I provide in here is just some information about how to create secure attachment, just kind of some how-tos, be predictable, not perfect. Don't try to fix somebody or, just be present for them. Come from a place of worthiness. And I kind of talk about the idea of what secure attachment is and how to act as if you have secure attachment, and it slowly can come. Your brain can rewire to experience secure attachment through some of these, how-tos and steps. We can develop secure connection with others when we're like, the sign that we have secure attachment with others is that we feel safe to disagree, have civil discourse with one another, share thoughts and feelings, experience spirituality with them or just on your own, and have them be a safe space where I can seek them out when I am in a state of imperfection, when I am in a state of struggle. All 12-step work is meant to help you with this, to allow you to live life on life's terms and to experience healthy connections with others. One of the greatest signs of mental health is a human who can engage in balanced, honest, fulfilling, intimate relationships with other humans. And ultimately, that is the goal of 12 steps. So with that, we have concluded Life Anonymous. As always, I'm going to encourage everybody to write in to me if you want. I'll add my email, but let me know for the next year what content you guys are going to want to talk about. I'm going to be getting my EMDR certification this year, so I think I'll be talking a lot about all the trauma work and all the trauma research that's kind of current about what is trauma, how it shows up in your body, and how to get through it. I also want to remind you that I have some new workshops starting in January. So I think I'm going to be giving a discount code out next week. So if you go to my website, sign up to be on the mailing list, when I send out an email to everybody with the discount code, you'll get it. And then you can go ahead and sign up for the workshops that I have starting in January. And with that said, that's it.
I didn't unmute. Betrayed partner workshops.
I do one betrayed partner workshop. And then I also have that work that we do with the Brene Brown stuff, where we kind of really do that personal, deep dive into what our shame is, how it shows up, how to build a shame resiliency practice, and really, really unwinding how it's so convoluted and it's so complex that we kind of pull it apart layer by layer to really take a deep dive into it.
Great. So go to KristinSnowden.com and sign up if you haven't already. And I get a lot of people that have connected through you as well. So great resources. So you started out with that I had mentioned that the 12 step is my favorite. It became my favorite because it was part of my journey. I have completed all the steps. I'm continuing to be in recovery. I 100% agree that this is a journey. I'm never done. There's always more, to do, but I'm so grateful for the journey and where I've come. With the having had a spiritual awakening as and I use all capitals on that, the result of these steps, working these steps. And I learned that, and I grew up, with a certain religious upbringing, and there's some core stuff, that was useful to me, but really where I got my higher power, where I connected with that, is through the 12 steps. And so having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, and that all the promises. So if you've done any work in the 12 steps, there's promises, all of them came true, but it, just like you said, it wasn't like, oh, now my life is, all perfect. And, there are no more problems. There is no more uncomfortable life situations. And it gave me the tools to be able to do life. On the triangle in 12 steps, it's unity, recovery, and service. Absolutely having the balance of that and knowing when, I get depleted. I think often of on the planes, put your oxygen mask on first. If I'm not taking care of me, I'm crabby and grumpy, but also I've got nothing to give. If my tank is empty, I've got nothing to give. I live this out. The 12 steps is how I live, because it gave me the tools to be able to do life. And you said, there's no classes on relationships. I think that people learn their relationships often in the most dysfunctional situations. It's how they grew up, their interactions with people, all those toxic messages that they took in about I can only show this person this part of me because otherwise they won't like me. And, I have to, so we're compartmentalized and we're showing facades, and we're always living the shame of, if somebody really knew what I really was like, they wouldn't love me, which is a false message. I want to be known for who I really am. And, people can like me or not. That's up to them, but I want to be in relationship and in communication with people, where we can be authentic. So for us, if we just keep doing the maintenance steps, 10, 11, and 12, that keeps things cleaned up. I'm grateful for step 10 because, I have to less, make amends, but I'm really glad that I can go, oh, I need to make amends, and I have the tools to be able to do this. So the freedom that has been shown to me through working the 12 steps, trust me, there's work. And then it's just living them, and I don't take them for granted. Yeah.
And by the way, I always work in safety. I realize now my body, I think one of the reasons why I love people in recovery so much, and I notice my body feels so safe with them. And I think it's that congruency part. Like, I feel like, oh, I can have like a hard conversation with these people and they won't look at me. Like, I can be like, wow, I'm really struggling with like being a parent today. And they would be like, oh, you're supposed to love your children unconditionally and never be exhausted from something like that ever. Right. Like, cause they just don't have a dog in that fight of like pretending to be greater human than they are. And so there's this congruency of like, it's safe for me to be vulnerable with these people because they know vulnerability. They know human suffering. So,
well, and being right sized, it's like,
being right sized,
in this moment, I'm not feeling like, parent of the year, and that's okay. It's like,
and are they perfect? No, like they screw up all over the place too. They have all the same character flaws. Yeah, they have all the same character flaws, and they're exhausted and feel unappreciated. And so, right? Like, they're not perfect. They're not like going to be my spiritual leader. They're just really real people.
Yeah. And in this moment, I'm going to go like, what do I need to do for self-care? I'm going to go do that because that's going to serve me and everybody else, well. So it's, okay. First question, as a recovering addict, I realized that some memories of my past are not actually the true reality, especially when I was acting out. I've been sober for 21 months, and it's been 5 months since our therapeutic disclosure. Recently, my betrayed partner and I had a text exchange that lasted for over 2 hours regarding an event that took place almost 2 years ago. My partner started the text exchange, perceived attacked by the addict, and I went right into defense mode and my memory reality of the past. Once the exchange stopped and I calmed down, I was able to sit down, put a pen to paper, and methodically piece together events using her past texts and my photos, the surprise, the true reality, her reality, and I apologize to her for not being able to see this sooner and abandoning her in her time of need. My question is this classified as gaslighting when my reality isn't actually reality? I think of gaslighting as knowingly trying to deceive or convince someone that their thoughts are not at all real. So what are the keys to prevent this?
So ironically, I just posted a webinar on gaslighting. So I wonder if your partner was in that gaslighting seminar. That's why the person came at you. I'm not sure. But that's kind of a misunderstanding. Sometimes we can directly try to mislead somebody, because we know we were acting out or we know we're having that affair, and we'll purposely mislead them. But I'm going to make up a scenario in my head. So someone could be like, hey, when you acted out, or when you left, because, I ultimately figured out because you were having sex with your affair partner, I felt abandoned. In our relationship, you were not there for me. And maybe you wrote this story in your head like, oh, I'm an amazing husband or wife. I provide financially. When I'm not acting out, I'm like playing with the kids. I'm being physically affectionate with my partner. So that might have been the way that you kind of wrapped yourself in this blanket of it's not that bad. I go out and get mine, with my affair partner or my drugs or alcohol, but then I come back and I'm here, I'm present. But so you may say, no, I disagree with you, wife or husband. I was here. I was a great partner when I wasn't acting out. But their reality, regardless of what your reality and experience was, is that they felt emotionally abandoned. They felt like you weren't able to carry on conversations because you would, days off to the side, or they just felt like there was just something incongruent with you, right? So they weren't able to feel safe enough with you to share stories with you, or you'd rage or you'd get defensive and it'd really shut them down. So that's a perfect example of, I don't mean to tell you what your reality is, but I can't hear your experience and your reality because I'm so defensive, because I'm so, I need my reality to be accurate. I need to not know that I hurt you that way, or that I really didn't have my addiction under control, and I might have not showed up for my kids the way that I could have, would have, should have, because my fragile ego can't sit with that story yet. So I'm going to gaslight you until you're wrong, you're too sensitive. These are all the ways that you're wrong. But the truth is that another person's experience and reality is theirs. And any effort I make to just kind of shut them down and validate their experience and their reality and just tell them what the real reality is, what they should be thinking and feeling, that's gaslighting. And I think you trailed off. This is one of the key ways to prevent, and then it stopped. But in my gaslighting video that I just posted, I talk about that.
So, but what I went back to was, how do you stop this? And like, I thought, well, if I got a text, what could I do differently? I could say, I acknowledge receipt of your text. I need to do some work. I need to go journal about this. I need to do whatever. I need to talk to my sponsor, rather than getting in the 2-hour text back and forth, because that pattern probably didn't serve either of you well. And now, I mean, I'm glad you owned up that, that my partner actually was right. But like I don't think it had to get worse. Like, I'm going like, could you have extricated yourself, said, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to go journal. I'm going to do some work on this. I'm going to see, and then let's talk about it. Maybe not text, have a conversation, and, have a safe space to have that conversation. So, but I love that, 21 months in, and with all due respect, that's fantastic. And that's also early. So you're having this realization, and you're going to be able to take this information and use it for the next time. So, I mean, that's how we learn, is we go, okay, here's some things I did well, here's some things I didn't do, that weren't as useful. What can I take from this, to move forward? So
right. You can't be invested in being right. You have to be invested in learning and understanding what they're saying. So I try to remind my neurobiology, because I get very defensive too, right? So if my husband or someone comes at me and says, you did this, or you made me feel this way, I kind of stop and I just try to step back and say, do I want to win this argument, or do I want to better understand why they're feeling this way? Like, I see them big words and arm movements and loud voices. That's someone whose body doesn't feel safe. So I need to better understand what happened that's making them this way.
Yeah. And I find being curious, is like,
Being curious, yeah.
And it takes me out of the defensive. Like, I'm really curious, I feel like this is a really big deal for you. I see the expressions, tell me more, and then, things stand a chance of simmering down. I suspect your partner knows that you get defensive. So it's okay. I'm feeling defensive. I want to take this in, I'm going to go do I'm going to call my sponsor. I'm going to do these things. Be clear, communicate, and then I'm going to get back with you because I want to have the discussion, but I don't want to react in a defensive manner that where you won't feel heard. So.
But that is good work. You are doing the walk of the courageous. You should be very proud of yourself.
Yes, and I love that you went and you went and did the curious. I'm going to go look at the stuff.
And you're here.
Yes,
another
exactly.
bonus.
Yeah.
Good job.
Okay, next question. If I just start the process of recovery with a partner, is there a standard model of treatment recommended, and what does it include? Trying to sort out how to start groups, individual, couples treatment, it's so much. So I'm just starting the process of a recovery with a partner. So
so we don't know if the person's a betrayed partner or the
I'm
addict.
kind of thinking that. Yeah.
Right. But either way, let's generally talk, right? So if you are the addict, there's, that if it's SAA, AA, there's 12-step, and that's the community, it's a fellowship. As we talk, there's a kind of system. You find a sponsor, you exchange phone numbers, and start doing your work through that way. If you're a betrayed partner, there's the Prodependence Anonymous, based on Rob Weiss's. It's supposed to be a non-shaming, blaming kind of safe space for betrayed partners to come to and figure out, how to set healthy boundaries, how to heal from the trauma, how to lean into healthier relationships right now, which is your fellows in the prodependence world. I have betrayed partner workshops, so that's good too, because they're really small groups of maybe 5 to 7 people where it's the only place where they feel safe to share what's really going on, right? Because if they walked into a PTA meeting and started talking about their addict partner, people would, they can't hold space for it. So every betrayed partner needs a safe space to share their story where they're not going to be like, oh, leave that person, or what's wrong with you that you're with that, right? And just know that's not where we're at. We're recovering for whatever reason. And this is the process. There's a lot of other people though that have, betrayed partners groups that have, I love the sex and relationship healing.com, the men's work groups that you guys have to kind of work the steps. Those are great. What else am I missing?
Well, I'm getting better on seekingintegrity.com. We've got work groups. So there are some paid work groups for the addict. And then there's a couples one that'll start again in January. On sexandrelationshiphealing.com, as Kristin was mentioning, there are multiple, groups for both the addict and the partner. And there's so much support and resources. But I also want to validate, of course you don't, this is a confusing world. And unless you need to step into this space, nobody grows up going, oh, and then at age whatever, I'm going to be dealing with
just walk into
infidelity. Yes.
Right.
Nobody knows that. So I'm glad you're here. And I think you'll find that the podcasts, the webinars, the previously recorded webinars, all of those are going to be, good and useful information to help you. But lean into the support. You're not alone. Neither of you.
Don't try to do it alone.
Right.
And our websites, both my website and Rob's, the sex and relationship healing.com, have links to Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, AA, NA.
Yeah.
So, use those because there's a directory for wherever you are. There's a directory of where they are. There's Zoom meetings. So just start there.
Yeah.
My book's a complement to going to 12 steps. It's really just it's not its own fellowship and entity, Life Anonymous. It gives therapeutic interventions or possible exercises, and anecdotal stories, through Scott, who's in recovery, and me, who doesn't identify as an addict, but got a lot from the 12 steps. So it's very different from the SAA or working a pro. So please work your SAA program. In fact, you can go online right now and find a Zoom meeting that you can attend tonight. Don't have to wait till January, and just start, dipping your toe into it, finding a sponsor, do it with the help of a sponsor. And I think you also heard all the resources that we just listed. But a Life Anonymous is, it's a great, I feel like it's a tool to help you conceptualize, better conceptualize and interpret the language of the 12 steps. But their material is great too. Their literary material, all the 12-step communities do a great job. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do this. I'm a sex and love addict in SLAA. Awesome. I'm still new to the program, but I recently got a sponsor and beginning to work the steps. Congratulations. My question is, how do I navigate the 12 steps, and how long does this journey typically take? I know this is probably a broad question, but I just wanted to get a general idea of the timeline. So Scott and I talk about that because that's a common question. And Scott's answer is like, well, you work the steps for as long as you need to work a step. Gosh, what's the British guy who has recovery? I forget his name, but he talks about the 12 steps in his book. And he said, it took 5 years and 2 weeks for me to do step 4. But the reason is because it was 5 years of putting it off and not wanting to deal with it and resistance, and then 2 weeks to sit down and do it. So it is a broad question. I think that's a great one for your sponsor to talk to. Ask people in the community how long they work the steps. But the idea is that you work the particular step with the sponsor, and he or she will give you feedback about whether it's genuine or not, or they have usually like specific exercises that they want you to do, and you work it. And then if you have a therapist that you can process that process with, that's great. I don't know. Anything to add, Tammy?
Well, when the 12 steps first started, they would sit down with a newcomer and they would do the steps. And then you'd redo the steps. You just kept doing them more, and they would do them. So I get, I think Russell Brand is probably who you're
Russell
talking
Brand.
about.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was thinking about that, but yeah. And the people that I have seen struggle the most are the ones that, I'm 2 years here or a year here, and I'm only on step 4. And it's like Russell mentioned, it's like, I just refuse to do it. You're also prolonging the freedom, or you're preventing the freedom that you get from doing the steps. I mean, the promises that I mentioned earlier, they come true if you do the steps. You don't have to do them perfectly. You have to do them. Working with a sponsor, I tell you, like working with a sponsor that knows the steps, that is dedicated to that, a sponsor that goes, yeah, I skipped that, skip the sponsor. So.
Yeah. And when I'm trying to do anything challenging that my body is not used to, a new way of thinking or whatever, new skill, I have it in podcasts. I'm reading it. I'm talking about it. Like I just have it in me and around me all the time. So that's just kind of what I encourage. Like read the books. There's so many great podcasts out there. There's Rob's podcast as well. There's other ones too in recovery. And all things understanding. So it just sinks in. It moves from your head down into your soul. The more you hear about it and learn about it. So
yes, integrated. Okay. So my betrayed partner and I are working on rebuilding our relationship and trust. I'm the addict. What suggestions can you offer us in terms of literature, activities, and/or therapy? By the way, we're both here this morning. Great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you are here. There's so much great literature that I'm like blanking right now, but on my website, I have recommended reading. So I have a lot of like my favorite books that I think are most impactful for an addict, for a betrayed partner. I know, again, Rob on sexandrelationshiphealing.com.
They're all categorized.
Yeah, he has great recommended reading as well. I think between my list and his list, it's pretty all the answers that you need. And there's also, right, are you in the education phase too of understanding what addiction is and how it comes from? And then okay, it's trauma too. Okay, I really want to understand trauma and how that shows up in my life, or attachment styles. And then you kind of unweave that. And then, I realize there's so much shame and fear of vulnerability. So then you want to work on that topic. But I'm just going to encourage you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here together. That's awesome. And this is the work of the courageous. So just take a minute. It's probably been a brutal path for you, but thank you for hanging in there with each other and doing this tough work, and just keep asking questions, keep seeking help, keep being around people who can understand you, and keep reading these materials, the podcasts, other things.
Yeah. And I'm going to tag on, if you're using therapy, which we highly recommend working with qualified professionals. So going to a generalist therapist often doesn't give you the results. I've used the analogy a bunch of times, like this is like cancer. It's a highly specialized area. You want a cancer specialist. You don't want your general practitioner, so you want the right help that really can help. But we've got a couples healing from betrayal workshop that will start on this website again in January. The Out of the Doghouse, when you're working on rebuilding trust, the work group will start January 10th. For guys who have been caught cheating. But we've got stuff for female ex and and male partners. So lots of resources. But thrilled that you're both here.
My betrayed partners group is I do a lot of education, boundary setting, kind of figuring out what your boundaries are, non-negotiables. I do a lot of addiction recovery education about what your partner might be doing on his end, what it might look like, his or her end, I should say.
Right.
So answering a lot of questions. They also seek help and support from one another. A lot of education on trauma, betrayal trauma, how to begin healing that kind of stuff.
Okay. When you talk about recovery process being lifelong as a betrayed partner, does this mean acting out usually is lifelong? Oh, no. Or is there a better prognosis? Okay. Recovery is lifelong, like the tools, learning to live life on life's terms. Personal growth is lifelong. But stopping the behavior is like, at our treatment program, we have a treatment program, Seeking Integrity Los Angeles, for men with sex addiction, intimacy disorders. You hear that? Intimacy disorders, or co-occurring sex addiction, chemical dependency. And, we're working on stopping the acting out behavior. And sometimes that includes, spending, eating, whatever, whatever forms those take. But stopping the behavior, I've been in recovery. I stopped the acting out behavior literally decades ago, but that doesn't mean that I don't still go, I'm going to go to my 12-step group this week because it's still meaningful for me. So does that?
Right. Like my life is very different in the way I engage with humans. So as from a non-addict perspective, I've worked through trauma and hurt, and my relationship looks very different than it did 10, 11, 12 years ago. But you betcha, like, not so great parts of myself still come up to the surface. So maybe it wouldn't technically be like relapse, but it's when we have those character defaults, and they come out when we're not in great places, when we are met with crisis and challenge and struggle. I mean, gosh, this COVID time period where it's just so much added stress has been a recipe for setting people up to be their not so great characters, right? The not so great parts of themselves are out because hurt people tend to hurt people. And I'm not saying it's okay, but you have to work really hard. You have to fight really hard to stay conscious and connected with your body and other people, and do these kind of 12-step maintenance things, the 10, 11, 12 of taking the inventories, make amends, be better, do better, prayer, mindfulness, being of service to other people, practice these things in all your affairs, and kind of know who you are and what you want to be, and have that safe connection with other people that sometimes they tell you truths that are kind of hard to swallow, but you sit and go, I'm going to think about that for a minute. That one hurt. So I'm going to just take a minute on that one. And think, and have that with other people.
Yeah. Well, and you're talking about COVID, and, I had this thought. I thought I might have had to use the 10-step more, during COVID than I have in the previous bunch of years, because this stuff comes up, but I'm not willing to not live in my serenity. So what do I need to do to get back to my serenity? Because if I'm doing something where I need to make an amends, that means I'm out of whack, and I need to do something to get back on the beam so that I can be, happy, joyous, and free, and living in my serenity. So, but I have the tools to use to be able to do that. So,
yeah, well said.
So thank you. This has been, Life Anonymous, the book in the background. And there's a link on her website, on my website. It's on Amazon, not my website, this website. It's not mine. I maintain them, so I do take ownership of them. So, oh well. Anyway, we'll see what January of 2022, what the topics are. But do reach out to Kristin or to me. I'll pass it on to Kristin. If you have topics that you'd specifically like her to, to talk about, she can whip up something. No doubt. So.
I'm all ears. people's choice for 2022? What kind of issues continue to boil up, and you're just finding struggle in them, and I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'm just going to err on what my next year is going to be, which is EMDR, trauma resiliency, all that kind of stuff.
Which is all great. If we're in shame and trauma, we can't show up authentically for anyone else. So So,
and I'd encourage you to check out these workshops. So many people are intimidated. Like, I don't want to come to a space where there's 5 people and we see each other's faces. But I promise you, it can be productive and beautiful and intimate and real and very healing for so many people. Like, I love group work because it is so effective and so impactful. So please check out my website, kristinsnowden.com, add your name to the mailing list or sign up for the workshops. But I love group work, and I'm really proud of the workshop material that we cover. So I'd encourage you to check that out.
I refer to her program a lot. So if you are a betrayed partner in particular, please know that when I send you her website, there's a reason. So, well, thank you. Have great holidays, and I'll see you in January of 2022.
Happy holidays.
Bye, everybody.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you so much.